Hi, welcome back to Something Private. This is a special episode. You guys can tell by the change in music, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, turn it up, go a little something like this. Now drop the beat.
You know the guys that run one of the OG hair removal parlors in Singapore, Strip? Well, they have another brand called Tulips, and they've invited us to join them on their little mission to teach you guys about your little sister. That's right, I'm talking about your vulva. We're clueless and a little embarrassed to talk about our vulvas, but we're so curious and we meddle with her all the time. Just think about all the hair removal hacks and cranberry juice tips all across social media. But caring for your vulvas is more than just an aesthetic conquest. She plays a big part in our overall health and well-being, so how do we keep our little sister well cared for? Join us as we voyage through the Vulva-verse with our friends at Tulips and Strip in a 5-part mini-series every last Wednesday of the month. Hi, Dr. Jess.
Hi, Nicole.
Welcome back to the show. This is the third episode that we have had you on board. So, hello.
Hi. I feel so wanted. Thanks. We often need to feel that way sometimes.
Yes, I want to validate you by saying every time I have an episode related to like vulva care, I'm like, okay, I'm calling Dr. Jess. I'm getting her down because I know she can provide me with like what I need. So, yeah,
well,
happy to have you.
Dr. Jess equals vulva.
Not a bad association, right?
Well, at least the messaging is clear. So yes, I'm affectionately known as Dr. Jess to all of my patients, and I run a medical clinic. It's called InSync Medical, and generally it's a space to deal with sexual health and sexual wellness issues and anything that's got to do with the genitals, be it for men, women, and all in between. So we offer that kind of time and space through unrushed consults to be able to fully ascertain, hey, what's going on with your sexual experiences? Could there be something physical going on in the background, something hormonal going on in the background, plus the thorough examination of structures like the vulva. And often people don't know much about the vulva, but they seem to think they know a lot about the vagina because that's what we find in textbooks, that's what we learn about in school.
I think now we can start to talk a bit about like the anatomy in general, and I know that you've brought a little,
yes.
What do we call it?
I don't know. People think I paint that, but I didn't. I wish I had great painting skills. I would have signed off my name here, but that would be copyright issues, I suppose.
So I think let's break down, I guess, like the figure or the structure.
Okay, number one, this thing sits right beside me in the clinic. So I don't introduce them to this or the anatomy of the clinic. It introduces itself to my patients. The first thing that they look at, men or women, when they come into the clinic. So men often get distracted and women often go, it's like a sense of realization. Like it helps them just open up because this thing's already glaring at them.
Yep.
Each one of us, we own one of this, but I bet with you, yours is not going to look like this. Mine's not going to look like this. This is just a very simplistic, diagrammatic approach so that we can go ahead and say, hey, this is what this is, and that is this, that has got this name.
Take me through.
Yeah, sure. You want to start?
This is the vulva, or an image of what a vulva would look like if you put a mirror directly between your legs, right?
Yeah. Good luck if you could see every single one of these structures. Yep. So this is essentially a diagrammatic, a graphic representation of what a very standard vulva would look like. There is so much variability with the vulva, but you could match yours up to something like this if you're trying to identify, what different parts of your vulva. So if I'll take you through, generally, of course, you have your bigger lips that surround it. I like to call it the fleshy bits. Yeah. So we call it the lips, right? In general, we say, hey, this is the lip that shuts and then it encaves everything in the middle. Now, when you part the lips, and the lips is where you get a pubic hair growth. When you part the lips, you see little bits of fleshy pink tissue on the inside. It looks like areas which are far more delicate than the regular skin that you get on the outside. Then this here, the lips included, makes your entire vulva. So this whole area with everything it encompasses is the vulva. So right at the top, and I often like to use this, like a finger like that in a teardrop shape, and I say, this is a little teardrop, and your vulva is kind of like a teardrop where the skin starts to split, right? You feel from the tip and you write it down, and you feel a little hump. That's the clitoris. So it's actually not the clitoris per se, but what you feel is the hood. You lift the hood off the clitoris, so then you see a little bulb. It's not as big sometimes in some women. In most women, you don't find it so prominent, so big. But there's a little bulb underneath there. It's a little knob. Now, what's misleading and what people don't know and are starting to know more and more now about this, because this is a space and the time in which we're talking so much about the female genital anatomy, is that this clitoris is just the top or the peak of it. The rest of the clitoris structure actually runs underneath, invisible to our eyes. We can't see it. So the rest of the structure is all internal and it extends to about 13 centimeters underneath. So it's actually quite a large clitoris, but you just see the peak of it. It's like an access button. So then below the clitoris, once you get past that road bump, as you're running your fingers down across it, then you hit a space. It's like, a little depression. You come to a space where everything starts to feel a little bit mushy. So then when you run down these mushy bits, you first come across your urine hole. And then when you run down the space, then you fall into this area where you go, okay, it feels a bit more sensitive. There's like a lot more space in that area. And when you run it down all the way down, you feel like, hey, I got caught on a hammock, the U. So when you get caught on the hammock, you feel like, that is the spot. If I just advance further, I will enter the opening of my vagina. Now, if you take a look at this diagram, you'll see a lot of these little tissues. Like, what's all these little funky bits here? They're just like little leftover tissue, which we call the hymen remnants. It's leftover of your hymen. All of us still have evidence of our hymen there. It's not 100% disappeared, but it's just regressed back. All you need to do is just fiddle around with it, and you'll push the tissues aside and you find an entrance. There's an opening. So people often don't find diagrams like this very helpful, because then the expectation is set that this is what my vulva should look like. And they'll come and say, I'm struggling to find something like this. Which is where we go by feel. Always go by feel. You know kind of where what is, but go by feel and then apply pressure and know what that feels like. And you know when you're at the bottom of your vulva, there's a little hammock. Place your finger there and try and see if you can advance it. And where you can advance it a little bit inwards, like your finger's getting swallowed in, that's when you know that's your vaginal entrance.
I think a lot of times, like I mentioned at the start of the episode, people mix it up and they call it the vagina. But you mentioned that, this is the vulva, and then like the inside is the vagina. Why is it important for us to be familiar and like use accurate terms and be able to name these parts?
It's just like, how we all want to be called by what we're known as. I think that's as basic as that, right? You don't want someone calling you, hey girl. Right? You want to be called by your name. You want to be addressed properly. And so that when you mention something, that's clarity. I know exactly what you're talking about, and you know exactly what you're talking about. So some people will come to us and say, hey doctor, my vagina is very dry. And by definition, vagina is the tube. Right? The canal.
Internally, right?
And I'm going to go, how do you know your vagina is dry? You often don't actually feel the internal dryness. It feels dry on the outside. I don't feel lubricated on the outside. Then I go, do you mean your vulva is dry? So it's simply to create clarity in conversations. I mean, I don't feel that vulva is a medical term. It shouldn't be. It should be a common term. That we should start addressing this area as vulva.
Take me through what happens to the vulva as a woman goes through like different stages in her life in terms of like physical appearances, as well as like like as a bodily function, as she starts puberty all the way to menopause.
So just before puberty happens, certain processes in the brain go ting ting ting, let's manufacture some estrogen. So estrogen, being the female hormones, now starts to have an influence on the breasts, is also the vulva. So what tends to happen in women or in girls who are going through puberty, and often the process already starts at age 8 or 9, and the hymen starts to thicken up, and that's the little tissues that surround the vaginal entrance. There could be some vaginal discharges that are starting to be produced. And there's also another hormone called progesterone, another female hormone that's being produced. And these two these two hormones work in sync with each other. And as they work in sync with each other and production starts to increase gradually over time, the hair over the labia, which is the fatty lips, start to become thicker and curlier. Discharges are something that women start to recognize because they see, girls also start to recognize because they start to see it on their underwear. As the vagina starts to hydrate itself, the cervix, the uterus, these organs start to produce more mucus, and they produce something that we call generally vaginal discharge, which is actually made up of material that is produced by the uterus, cervix, and vagina, all descending down the same tube.
I feel like during this period of time, after puberty, and I guess that's kind of where I am in my stage of life now, right? Like my early 20s.
Oh, I thought you meant puberty. Okay.
No, post-puberty, pre-pregnancy, that little like stage. I think we see a lot of things in like popular culture, right? We see like hair removal. Okay. Yeah, the very common one that I've been seeing a lot as I was doing research on like this particular episode and previous episodes doing with you, right? This procedure where women want to go and surgically get their, like the lips of their vulva to be made smaller. So they cut off like the skin and basically do all sorts of things to make the vulva not look like the vulva, right? And then friends telling you stuff like, they had sex with like somebody and then somebody told them that like, oh, your vagina looks like different or like weird, compared to the other vaginas I've seen before.
So I suppose we're talking about that stage in your life where you're becoming more explorative and you are engaging with other individuals who might visualize a very private part of your body, right? More often than not, women have their own personal perception of what their body is like, including their genitals. Less often it is because of what social norms are, meaning, hey, everybody is removing pubic hair, so I also jump on the same bandwagon, I go and remove my pubic hair. And it's also often less so because a male partner or another female partner has commented about the state or the look of or the appearance of the vulva. Women do have this perception of their own bodies, and the amount of sexual satisfaction they get is often correlated to how well they perceive their genitals to be or how satisfied they are with their genitalia. So many women are removing pubic hair mainly because they just don't like the appearance of the thick curlier hair in that area, and it's intrusive, it's interruptive. They don't feel clean, they don't feel that hygienic with it, they don't feel they can wear certain types of outfits, swimsuit or a particular type of underwear. So they make these sort of decisions based on very, very personal preferences rather than somebody else's preference, or this is in style, this is in fashion, so I'll go ahead and do it. So when we make decisions like that, it's because of a personal preference. In talking about what you've mentioned, like trimming down the size of the labia, so the part that we're talking about is the labia minora, the smaller lips, the ones that I mentioned can open up like a butterfly in some women who've got larger lips. Now, there are two different groups of women, I suppose, and in some cases we classify the larger labias as Labia Minora Hypertrophy. Now, what in the world that means is just meant it's enlarged. It's larger than not normal. There is no set normal for what the size of the labia minora should be. But generally, if you just simplistically think about it, if your labia minora is quite big, it is going to dangle outside your fatty lips.
Yep.
How would that feel to someone who is an owner of labia that is that large? It's going to suffer from abrasions. It's going to suffer from ulcerations. They feel that they have to do a tuck in, fold the labia minora up, tuck it into their bigger lips so that they can feel comfortable across the day. And sometimes it creates a little bit more of a camel toe than you would like when you are wearing tighter clothing. It's not an aesthetically pleasing appearance to themselves. Women often don't worry what they might look like to others, but more often when they look at themselves in the mirror, they don't appreciate that look.
And it is like what I see.
Exactly. Right? So there is that group of women who will succumb or request a labiaplasty. So that's the name of the procedure that is used to actually reduce the size of the labia so that they have a better level of comfort. There is another group of women who are not suffering from discomfort from having larger labias, but they are paying a lot of attention to their genitalia. And a lot of women start paying a lot of attention to their genitalia because they want to increase their appreciation of their own bodies so that their sexual satisfaction also improves, their sexual confidence also improves. But we do that to ourselves. We want to see ourselves in the best light. We want the best form of ourselves. So we then seek aesthetic procedures that might be done to actually reduce the size of it. Often our labia, and like the rest of our bodies, is not symmetrical. We wish we had perfect symmetry. And when it doesn't fall in that category, we think that it is not quite normal. But like I've mentioned, there is no standard of normal for the labia.
There's a misconception that, like, you know, if you have, during this period of time, if you have like more sexual experiences, like the inside of your vagina can become loose.
It's really very interesting and mind-boggling that you said that, because the comment that came, if you have many sexual experiences, you might get loose. But who is that good for and who is that bad for? Are we talking from a male perspective or the penetrator's perspective? Well, penetrator sounds like a really terrible term.
Penetrator.
but you understand what I mean, right? Are we talking from a male perspective here, that, you know, hey, I shouldn't be too loose because then my partner's not going to have a great time because it's not gripping enough? Or fact is, you're not going to get too loose from having multiple sexual encounters. If you've had injury to your pelvic floor muscles, these are muscles that support the vagina, right? And they hold them in place properly, and they are like the support structures, like the scaffolds, and they hold them in place. If you've had injury to those pelvic floor muscles, your scaffold collapses, and then your vagina gets looser. And then that can happen in states like pregnancy, you know, where you've had so much of stretching to that pelvic floor. It happens during childbirth, where you've had a little bit of a traumatic experience as the baby exits the vagina. A little bit of a traumatic experience. I'm not going to heighten it. So yes, in those states, the pelvic floor can be loosened because they've gone through immense amount of stretching. And often the question we get asked is, hey, can the vagina return back to normal or not after delivery? After childbirth. After childbirth. It doesn't exactly return back to its 100%, you know, before pregnancy state. It remains a little bit looser, but it tightens up. It tightens up. But will it bring you back to your original? No. Brings you back maybe about 80%.
I have never given birth, so I have no visual clue of like what happens to the vulva as, you know, she experiences childbirth. I think the only things I've really heard of is, you know, that when you go through like a natural kind of birth, the vaginal canal like opens up, and then sometimes there's a tear that comes between, that forms between the vagina and the anus, right?
Anus,
so that sounds really scary to me, and that's all I want to think about. So yeah.
Actually, during pregnancy, there's quite a few changes. So, have you seen a pregnant woman's belly?
I have stretch marks.
Besides stretch marks, have you noticed anything else?
The skin is very thin.
There's one other change. There's this darkened line right down the middle. And it extends well below the belly button sometimes. And that's called linea nigra. So during pregnancy, because of this surge of estrogen hormones and that other hormone we spoke about, the progesterone hormones, these hormones sort of stimulate other sort of hormones that increase your production of pigments, melanin, right, in your body. So during pregnancy, a lot of women tend to pigment up a little bit more. They tend to darken up a little bit more. And this is not like a nice homogeneous darkening, you know, it's a patchy darkening. So you can get patches on the face. You can get suddenly very dark nipples. The areola, the circle just, you know, around the nipple gets darker as well. Women find that their inner thighs start to get darker. The labia majora starts to get darker. And they find they get this bizarre line that just splits like their tummy in half. And that's the linea nigra. So that's one of the changes the vulva goes through during pregnancy. Darkening, pigmentation. And the darkening doesn't always go away completely. So that line down the belly often disappears, and it takes months for that to completely clear away. Women find that the vulva darkening, the lips darkening, and the inner thighs seems to stay. It reduces intensity, but it seems to stay even after delivery of their child. So that's one of the changes. Another changes that some women go through, and Caucasian women or women of Western origin seem to have a higher risk of things like blood clots in the third trimester of their pregnancy, so in the later stages of their pregnancy and soon after delivery. And that's because the estrogen surges in the body, and estrogen is a blood clotter. So have you heard of varicose veins?
No.
Varicose veins are these little bulgy veins that you get on your legs. I've got them. So a lot of us who have jobs where we stand a lot or we sit a lot, we get a lot of pooling of blood in our legs, and then it doesn't flow properly. So then you get this retention of blood in these veins, and then they sort of flare up and they look like little worms, wriggling on your legs. You can get them even right up at the level of your labia. So some women will experience varicose veins on their labia, and it looks like they've got bulgy veins on their labia, like the back of your hand. You see your veins very obviously when you squeeze. You will see these sort of patterns on the labia. So these are some of the changes. Besides the color becoming more intense, becoming darker, some women experience varicose veins on their labia majoras. And then, of course, women experience different types of discharges. So the discharge might feel a little bit more intense. There might be increased risk of vaginal infections during pregnancy as well. Things like common fungal infections tend to appear a little bit more.
And that is because of?
The surges of the hormones. They change the environment in the vulva, they change the environment in the vagina, and they increase the risk of these sort of infections.
Yeah, this is just slightly shocking to me because it's never occurred to me like how much changes a woman goes through during like childbirth. It's really scary.
Yes, there is a baby exiting that canal, and it's not just your vagina that expands. Look, the rest of the body accommodates as well, works together with the vagina. The whole pelvic floor opens up, your hip widens up, all in preparation of this exit. But if those things don't happen in conjunction, by golly, that baby is not going to come out. So there are many other structures that also expand. And then the vagina also goes through a stretch process. So that tells you how tenacious the vagina actually is. And then all you suffer is a tear that is across the perineum, which is the area you identify, the area between the vagina and the anus. And there's quite a lot of tissue there.
As you said it, my body just like froze up. I mean, as you are talking about it, I think in recent like popular culture, there's a topic that has been quite like out there, which is this whole idea of like the husband stitch. For the purposes of like our people tuning in, essentially that is as the doctor is stitching up a woman because she has a tear, between the vagina and the anus. The husband stitch is basically when like a man requests for the whole
eyebrows
to be stitched up even tighter. I don't know, I've seen a lot of articles about it and I've read so much about it, and it's frightening.
The husband's stitch should not be a decision a husband makes. It should not be something that the doctor consults the partner and go in and by the way, I'm just going to tighten it up. It's not a decision that you make as a doctor either, and it shouldn't be done like that. There should be a proper form of assessment, meaning before delivery, there could be easy questions that could be asked to the woman. A woman could be consulted in the doctor's clinic and could be asked about her satisfaction with penetration. And she could address to you issues like, I don't quite feel the grip, or I feel like I have to forcefully, like purposefully grip or squeeze my pelvic floor in order to feel my husband's penis penetrating me because I don't feel the grip. Because what's important is what she feels, because she's the person who's going to be penetrated. So addressing her concerns are important. And if she says that, I feel like it's already quite loose, I don't have a good sensation of the grip there, then the conversation could open up. When we stitch up, would you like us to also perform a little bit of a tightening procedure for you? Then she makes the consent. But the stitches that should be applied are stitches that are simply to fix the tears. If an additional stitch or more work is going to be done to tighten the original size of her vagina, that should be informed to her.
We're taking a short break. Something Private is a podcast produced under media publisher Our Grandfather's Story. Watch our new episodes every alternate Tuesdays on YouTube and listen to us on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcast every alternate Thursdays. New episodes will be published first on YouTube and we'll be publishing once every 2 weeks this season. We've also just launched our new website, so pay us a visit at somethingprivate.fm if you'd like to share your story with us or work with us. Otherwise, you can send us a message on Instagram at somethingprivatepod or email us at nicole@somethingprivate.fm. We're immensely grateful for all the support you guys have given us, and we really couldn't have come this far without you. If you'd like to keep supporting our work, become our Patreon at patreon.com/somethingprivatepod. That's patreon.com/somethingprivatepod. Now back to the episode. I guess in your experience, like these women, how do they cope with like the physical changes?
I feel that a lot of us are very reasonable and they go, okay, let's see how things are after delivery. And let me see what my body is like post-pregnancy, you know, not just one day post-pregnancy. You know, you're talking about give it a couple of good months post-pregnancy. Does my body return back to a state which I find is acceptable for me? The aesthetic appearance of my vulva is now still acceptable to me. And if they find that this is an ongoing issue, then of course, you know, it is very important to have this looked at, because varicosities or varicose veins on the vulva is not something you take lightly. It could be an indication of a little bit of a blood clot within one of the bigger veins inside. So it's worthwhile looking into.
It could be a health issue.
Exactly. It could be congestion of the veins in the pelvis, which is the lower part of your abdomen. And that could indicate things like, you know, you might be at higher risk of having pain during sex. You might always have this heavy, full feeling in your pelvic, like you're dragging your abdomen around wherever you go. So it might be indicators of something else.
Interesting. So as a woman then, I guess, moves on from childbirth to menopause, what are some of the...
We've got so many stages to go through.
It's so much happening at once. I'm so overwhelmed.
Menopause is one of those things that hit us quite suddenly, isn't it? It's like the machinery is working and then bang, it decides to stop producing the hormones that we have grown so adjusted to from ages, 9, 10, 12, all the way up to 50. The average age of menopause is about 52. And during menopause, suddenly this ovary factory decides that, you know, hey, I've got no more eggs to go and mature, and sorry, I've got no more cells to produce estrogen for you. Of course, the estrogen production doesn't crash to 0%, but it really diminishes quite suddenly. Unlike in men, they don't go through menopause like we do. They have something called andropause.
Yes,
right?
I've heard.
and it just declines by 1% every year after the age of 50. But for us, it's like, you know, forget the gradual decline. Let's just crash it. So it just goes boom.
Interesting.
And that's a massive change, you know. And one day you're okay, in the next couple of weeks or months, you're not okay. You're different. You're a different person physically. You're a different person hormonally. And our bodies are expected to cope with that change. And part and parcel of that comes with changes to the vulva, because the vulva is very reliant on stimulation by the hormone estrogen. Keeps it hydrated, keeps it looking supple, keeps collagen going, keeps the survival of elastic tissue there. So what women in their menopausal ages, and if you just forget menopause, just before menopause there's a decline, right? Slowly there's a decline of all these hormones. They find that the outer appearance of the vulva, it starts to change by a saggy appearance of the labia. It's like somebody deflated the labia. Suck the air out of the balloon, and all you're left with is this saggy loose skin that wrinkles up. So that's one of the first few changes. The other changes are the dryness. So women will find, like, you know, I used to have these folds, these nice folds. I can see them like at the entrance of my vagina. I see these folds, and you lose the folds. They all start to straighten out and flatten out. So you lose what we call the rugae, which is within the vagina. You lose that as well. The other thing is that as dryness starts, what happens is the tissues start to gather themselves, and then they all get tight. It's like as if you wash your face after you've used a really good soap to wash your face. You feel that squeaky clean, and it feels really tight. So it kind of feels like that down in the vulva area. Women who have menopause are at higher risk of something called lichen sclerosis, where the tissues in the vulva area start to dry up and they start to fuse. Like one structure fuses into another, and you can't quite distinguish where the clitoris is anymore, where the labia minora is anymore. Everything is fusing into one another. And that's when it gets very uncomfortable for some of these women who suffer from lichen in the older stages of their lives. So yes, the vulva is ever evolving through a woman's lifetime.
I'm wondering, like, are there common, like, emotional, psychological issues that women face? I know, you know, one common thing that I've often heard of is that when women go through, like, menopause, for instance, their mental health gets quite affected because of, like, the hormonal changes, right? And I think, like, menopausal and, like, menopause depression is quite a common thing that happens to women as they go through, like, as they enter that last kind of stage in their life. Yeah.
It's very sad that this so-called last stage in your life or last big milestone in a woman's life is happening midlife.
It's true. She's only just begin to like
we say, right, 40s is the new
30s.
20s, or I'm saying 20s, you say 30s. but yeah, it feels like at 50 we're really only starting, 40s we're really only starting to establish ourselves. We're becoming like fully, forget about financial independence, but having a good amount of money in the bank. We go, okay, this is where we're going to holiday, we're going to do this, we're going to embark on these sort of journeys. And then you go, okay, 10 years from now, my hormonal profile is going to change. I'm menopaused. 10 years from now, it just feels like the elixir of life has been taken away from you. And it is unfair. We have advanced so quickly, technologically, but our bodies have been left behind. Our women's bodies haven't changed or evolved that quickly. I wish menopause happened at 70 or 80. That would be fair. But it doesn't. So, things that women do now is under the realm of replacement therapy. We replace the hormones that you might have depleted. It is one of those things that women could ask for or could see if they're suitable to take something like that, just to persist with their usual, their pre-menopause hormone levels and take it through for another good 10 years. Now, of course, many women also then suffer from some symptoms. So, if you get irritability, you get dryness, you get repeated urine tract infections after menopause, then something like menopause hormone therapy would be, an option for you, and you could take something like that just to ride through a little bit with a little bit more hormones for another 10 years. In fact, it's very safe to take between ages 50 to 60. So there are a few women who started in their late 40s and then they carry it on until they're 60. Beyond age 60, there's data to show that there's increased risk of things like breast cancers and cardiac or heart problems. So often we don't recommend it beyond age 60. But who's to know? This is the data now. What would be the data down the road? Things will change. Medicine is ever evolving.
Yeah, I was just sharing with you just now. It sounds as if it's like a cushion for like the crash, right, that you mentioned, that is menopause.
It's like that inflatable mat that you fall on.
Yeah.
It makes the impact less dramatic.
Yeah. Basically, this gives you like new life, right? This whole...
Right, I suppose, because you see, for women, from the time we start menstruation right up to our 50s, we are battling with period issues, right? Monthly period issues. Of course, there's means and ways of stopping the periods through the use of things like birth control, devices that you put into the uterus. But many of us, battle periods on a monthly basis. And then when we hit menopause, the dreadful periods stop. But then we are faced with a new problem. And we are in that phase in our lives, often in our 40s, where finally things are all great, you've got a great job going for you, you've got a good amount of stash of money in the bank account, and you go, hey, I want to start living. But when we're about to embark on this, I want to start living, therein comes in the party pooper called menopause. And that takes that away from you, and it dips your hormones, it changes you. You're no longer the person you were in your 40s. You're now a brand new person, not a better version of you, but you're a different person because now you're a person riding on much lesser hormones. Many women complain of being dry, that they actually feel a physical dryness or extra sensitivity on their vulva as they grow older, and then cannot even begin to engage in activities like masturbation or even sexual intercourse with their partners. So, whoever says that sex has to stop in and around that time of our lives when we are finally have the ability to actually live. Journey around the world, take our time in our retirement, and start living. And I think a lot of the times the true living happens in that time frame. A lot of us are workaholics. We work our days away when we're in our prime, in our 30s and our 40s. And then when we get to unwind, we want to start living then.
I picture my 50s as me going through my second divorce, living the time of my life, and I'll be very depressed if at that stage I find out that I cannot have sex because my vagina's just fused, or my vulva's just fused into each other, you know what I mean?
I mean, talking about that, finding new love in a later stage of your life. So I've seen a few women in my clinic who have approached us to aesthetically change the appearance of their vulvas. And if you dig into the story further, and this is where finding out who they are, where they're from, why they want a procedure like this is so critical. And many of these women are women who've been through divorces, exiting a relationship that is unhealthy for them. They are in their 40s and they're seeking new love. They're dating again. How hard is it for a woman in their 40s to date again?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I'm struggling now, so...
But it's a hard space, because then you get very conscious of being absolutely vulnerable in your naked state in front of another person. You go, oh, I'm not what I used to be. I haven't got my body that I had when I was in my 20s. Things look different. I'm seeing the changes of age that has happened to my vulva. I'm not confident about this. I can't put myself out there. I don't want to be open to judgment, although it might not be open spoken judgment. But yeah, maybe we overthink a few things, but it's a projection of how we feel about ourselves.
To round up like this particular conversation on like vulva care and stuff like that, I want to know, why is it important for us to recognize or like to be cognizant of the fact that our vulva goes through these like physical changes and like hormonal changes as we age? Yeah.
I think that's the only way you're going to go, hey, what are the options open for me? Because I've identified the problem. Like, I know this is what I can expect as I enter this phase of my life. I've identified the issue, or I recognize something has changed about me. I can seek attention from a professional and go, can you help me address? Is this indeed what I think it is? My vulva's experience has changed. I'm having dryness. I'm having more discharge. I'm having an infection. Or so I think this is the case. I'm getting repeated urine tract infections. Why? And I've just menopaused 2 years ago. And when we recognize that these are the issues, then you can extend further questions to whoever who's dealing with you, who's a professional, and go, is there anything else I can do? Take, for example, urine tract infections in someone who is menopausing or menopausal. She can go and ask, instead of just treating it with antibiotics each time I get this, I'm sure there's other options that can help me prevent it. I have menopause. Is there a little hormone that I can take? Or something that I can insert into my vagina that helps to replace the hormones there and rejuvenate that area for me so I don't keep getting this nuisance urine tract infections?
I have this friend who basically, it's a bit of a horror story. Like, she shared with me that a friend of hers essentially had like recurring UTIs. She's a young woman like myself, like 20-something, but she had recurring UTIs, and I think she was afraid to go and seek help because she wasn't really sure if like UTIs were like sexually transmitted infections or stuff like that, and there was a lot of shame around it. And so it got so bad that eventually I think she developed like a really bad fever and had to be sent to the hospital, like A&E and all, and they were like, oh, like you're having like kidney problems because of like the UTI. And I think like at that point of time, yeah, I was like in shock. I was like, how could it have gotten so bad that, you know, you let it become like this? It's so scary. Yeah.
A lot of younger girls also are hesitant about being examined in doctors' clinics because of body confidence as well. And they feel they have to be at their prime and proper and trimmed and shaved. The number of times women walk into our clinic and then they will apologize. Oh, sorry, doc, I didn't shave. I don't expect you to. I really don't expect you to. Oh, I just came from the gym. I mean, I understand they're being courteous, right? And just informing me. We get that. And thank you very much for informing. But you don't have to be prim and proper when you come in. And that's because we have to be able to accept that, you know, this is what it does look like. You don't have to shave for your doctors. Unless something's being done to you and the shaving is required. And there are things like that. So people feel like they have to be at their best to present themselves to a doctor clinic when they are at their worst, suffering from an infection. And that's what delays a lot of their very own diagnosis, because they let it fester and they don't feel like they can approach. There's a bit of worry, shame, low confidence around it, and thinking that it might just go away. You know, it might just dissipate on its own.
No, I think that's a really bad. Yeah, every time the second I notice like something's off, right, I'm like, okay, I'm going to the doctor. Just to round up the conversation for today, I just want to know, you know, for the purposes of the women who are listening to our podcast, do you have any like last nuggets of wisdom that you like to impart to them with regards to I guess like caring about your vagina, or like, yeah, like going to seek help for something, you know, if you realize that, you know, something's off, for instance.
The big thing is please be familiar, like very familiar of what you are in those areas of your body. So be familiar with your vulva. You carry it with you day in, day out, 24/7. You are expected, and you should know your body better than anybody else. There are many people in a relationship who expect their partners to know their vulvas better than they know their own vulvas. So as vulva owners, we deserve to give our vulvas far more respect than that, and attention. And we're not saying pamper it, but we're saying get to know it. Be explorative. It is not possible for you to hurt it through simple exploration. Take a picture, look at it with a mirror, feel it. I find the greatest empowerment with knowing where what is on your vulva is to feel it. Because when you feel a problem, when you feel a symptom, when you feel something's not right, you can exactly go, I don't feel comfortable in this area. It is exactly there, as opposed to going, oh, something's just not right down there. So that way you're more educated and you're able to relay across your problem clearly, and therefore then get attention for that problem quicker, rather than, you know, running around the mulberry bush like a headless chicken. So exploration and being familiar would be the two things I would say that, you know, all women should do. And it's about time we feel proud of our vulvas, just like men feel very proud of their penises. We should give it that kind of a respect in this day and age.
I just want to end off by saying that every time I have a new partner, I'm not condoning anything, I'm not condoning any lifestyle, but I often like to share them. I'm like, don't you think she looks great? Give her respect, show her respect. She's so cute. Like, I don't know. I think that's really important to say. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think that's all for today's episode. So
well, thank you.
thanks a lot, Dr. Jess.
No worries.